I'd like to welcome everybody to the part 2 of the power of finding contentment early. So this is the next lesson and is a continuation of the first part, of course. So I would like to talk about the drawing that we talked about in the last lesson on gravitational thinking. Just to go over it because it's kind of an important topic that we're going over here. So you can see here that before we run into this event, our energy is one single energy, right? And then we run into some sort of an event or state that we want to maintain or continue, right? This could be something that we found to be enjoyable. It could also be a state of protection or a state of safety that we wish to maintain after having a bad event, right? So this is us in the present having this experience, which is now causing a form of contentment, right? And then we move off in the present day, right? We keep on moving. But part of our energy splits off in a sense, right? Stays in this spot, right? We've had the experience, but part of our energy decides that it wants to maintain this feeling, right? That it wants to continue this feeling and will now be discontent if this feeling is not present in our lives, right? So it's a choice to be discontent. So like we said before, because of this, once we've obtained this state or obtained this item or whatever we're dealing with, very soon after we begin to feel pressure and worry and anxiety because we know that this state only is temporary. And we can feel the pressure of it leaving almost right away, right? And as we get less and less, this anxiety and worry and pressure builds up until finally the state is gone, right? Gone. So far we've had a few moments of contentment, followed by a great deal of anxiety, pressure, and worry, leading to having nothing, in a way, right? Because we want to hold on to this state, and we are unwilling to be content unless this state is present in our lives, right? So here's where it really gets interesting, because on this side of the circle, this is where we start to have this energy, which has a plan, right, to obtain this again, will begin to compete with us in the present moment for control of the present moment and our present energy, right? So that's how we have energy working against energy in our bodies, right? We are always in the present, but often there are energies started from activities or states in the past that we want to maintain. And these energies will begin to work against our present moment and pressure us or begin to compete for control of the present of the present moment, right? So we end up with an argument with ourselves over freedom in the present moment. So this is where we're dealing with this form of sitting still physically, right? We talked in the last lesson about a type of fasting, right? And I wanted to kind of go over that because it's important to realize a couple things, right? We spoke in the last lesson about using a type of fasting each day as a meditation for the body, to help the body sit in contentment and listen to the cravings we placed there in the past, right? Which may be competing with us for control of the present moment, like we spoke of it with this document here. It's important to note that this daily ending of consumption is never meant to harm the body, right? So we know that certain religious groups, believe in eating nothing almost. This is not one of them, right? It's important to note that this ending of consumption is not meant to hurt the body in any way at all. If it is hurting the body, we're doing it wrong. In fact, whether we listen to religious teachings or philosophies or whatever we're listening to, it is intelligent, right? It is common sense to eat all that is required for us to be healthy, right? So no form of higher spirituality comes from denying the body what it needs. Right? So this is not about ending healthy consumption. This is about ending unhealthy consumption, right? Which is called overconsumption. Right? Even when we eat a lot of or more than we need of good things, it's still overconsumption, right? So I stress in every way that I am not a doctor, right? And I'm not, offering any sort of medical knowledge. In fact, I wouldn't mind going over my disclaimer for a second. If I can put my notes away here for a second. Somewhere I've got it here. And these are included not because we think we're doing anything wrong, but it's very wise to take a look at them because it shows some wisdom here, right? It says that all information provided by this video is of a general nature and is furnished only for entertainment purposes, right? The reason it's for entertainment purposes is because I am not a doctor. It can't be for health purposes. I have no credentials, right? So for that reason, no information is to be taken as medical or other health advice pertaining to any individual specific health or medical condition, right? And that we all agree to use this information at our own risk, right? Which makes complete sense, right? We need to follow our own common sense, right? When we're listening to teachers and listening to lessons. That if something does not resonate with you because it sounds unhealthy, you should not be following that thing, right? You should follow your how you resonate, and you should follow common sense, right? So for that reason, we agree, to use this information at our own risk and to hold myself and the Dancing Buddha and any associates blameless, right? Free of any losses, liabilities, injuries, damages, that sort of thing, right? That we take responsibility for offering this information to you, but we also, need to cooperate by thinking with common sense when we're entering into these types of things. So anyways, I just wanted to go over that, not that I already did that before. Not that I'm particularly worried, but it's just wisdom, right? So where are my notes here? So like I said, when we were going over the disclaimer, we are required by logic to take in whatever is healthy. We shouldn't be able to be talked out of that, right? Only, in my experience, healthy consumption can be a single meal each day, right? My experience only, not offered as medical advice, just my experience. And the experience of thousands and thousands of monks, right? They've survived as well. So imagine that, right? Eating a single meal each day. Now I eat, it kind of depends. I will sometimes have a zone to eat. I will maybe have consumption between 6 a.m. and 12, and during that time I may have, I like vegetable juices and that sort of thing. So maybe a juice and a meal, that kind of thing. So but I basically limit my consumption to one part of the day. And then after 12 o'clock, I don't consume anything after that, right? Just my way of doing it. And there are other times when I will only sit down once and consume. So I will sit down at 12 o'clock or at 1 o'clock and I won't consume anything until then. But really, it doesn't really matter because all we're doing is we're setting a guideline of when we're going to eat healthy, and then we're going to stop and see how much pressure is being exerted to eat unhealthy, right? So why once a day? And how can we survive eating once a day? Right? You see, monks have been surviving on a single meal for thousands of years because they use the single bowl method, or a bowl that they bring either for begging or to the table where the food is set up, to represent their meal for the day, right? It represents the bowl our bodies have already given us, right? The bowl our bodies have already given us, which is our stomach, right? Sorry. So imagine a car which needs to be refueled every couple of hours, even when it's idling, right? It would never have survived this very tough market out there, right? Nobody wanted to buy it, right? Because it was inefficient, right? It needed to be filled up all the time to be useful. So there has never been a more efficient designer than evolution, right? Even tougher than car designers. And that being said, that any animal that would require to be fed more than once a day to survive would not have made it through evolution's tough trials, right? Eventually, there would have been an issue that would have led to its demisal, right? That it's kind of fair to say, or logic dictates, that for most beings that have survived evolution's trials up to this point, that the stomach generally represents the minimum amount of food required to survive for a day, right? Probably not all animals. I'm sure you could find a few animals that's not true, right? But I say for most of us, and likely humans, right, that the fact that we have survived through evolution really shows that the stomach, or the device used to hold food, is likely at least big enough to survive for a day or even longer. And likely the stomach represents not the basic or the minimum amount, but it likely represents the perfect amount, right? The perfect amount of food required to survive for a day, and likely longer than a day, right? Or else we wouldn't have survived, right? So that being said, it leads to the conclusion that much of what we're doing is over-consuming. And that this is not a fight against consumption. This is a fight against overconsumption. And not just food, right? Not just food. Entertainment, right? Our senses, just like eating, has become a form of joy because of taste. Our senses have been used for forms of entertainment lately, right? So for that reason, overconsumption can include food, can include TV, and other forms of entertainment, or really any activity that turns our senses into an entertainment console for our pleasure center. Possibly an addiction growing here, right? Not what nature intended, I suppose, when she attached a lot of sensors to a processor, right? To turn ourselves into a sensory game for our own self-pleasure, right? In essence, in many, many ways, we simply live a life of self-masturbation, right? Of finding self-pleasure, but in many physical ways, right? Not just sexual. So we are designed to perfectly tune into our environment with these senses. But instead we play a daily game of overloading our senses to ring the pleasure sensor as many times as we can before we go to sleep. Right? And for that reason, these poor senses that are perfectly tuned to our environment are not perceiving our environment at all. Right? Imagine how we will perceive the world when we have stopped abusing our senses, right? So these are all things that we discover when we sit in contentment physically by using consumption minimally or just for health, and to set a time when consumption is over each day, right? Right? We notice that something is wrong. By eating thoughtfully, and by using foods and sensory inputs as medicine and fuel instead of entertainment, using television and these electronics as instruction and medicine, right, in the prescribed amounts that give us health, but no more, right? No more than what brings us health. And by doing so once a day, we will be able to consider the rest of our urges as coming from a place not concerned about our health, but more concerned with sensory feelings and pleasures. And now we can begin to work with these energies to bring these energies from this place of really almost a form of addiction, right? To a place of finding true contentment again by ending these circular processes that are on this picture here, right? Because that's really what we're describing, right? We are again describing these circular processes, right? That these are processes that ask to be continued over and over again, and that build up a lot of pressure to control our present moment, so that we who began in the present moment, who are now sitting in the present moment, have really limited energy to do the things that we want to do, because most of our energy is being used to pressure us to follow past ways of being, right? So there is an end to these pressures, and that's called healing, right? Healing does not come from feeding this wheel. It comes from dismantling these wheels so that we live in an environment where there is no gravitational thinking, where there is no thinking that goes around and around and holds us like an anchor in one place, right? And when all of these wheels are dismantled, except for the wheel of eating healthy and healthy consumption, and that wheel is simply done once a day at an appropriate time, then what we'll find is, in a world with only one wheel, and when that wheel ends early in the day, we will live in a world without gravitational thinking at all. And something magical begins to happen, because this is the place where our consumptive state of mind falls asleep, right? When we're always in the mind of consuming, we have certain kind of qualities which appeal to us more than others, right? That is why, lying and stealing and all these things are actually quite healthy, if we are living in a world of consuming at any cost, right? And so we try to lessen our desire to be less than truthful, or all these things that are going on, even though we need things in our life, and we try to be a good person. But what we're really doing is we're fighting the natural tendency to be dishonest to obtain things, right? And if we live in a world where we've never stopped thinking about obtaining things, we will always have that battle. But in a world where consumption falls asleep at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, so do all the qualities that go with consumption. The desire to be dishonest, the desire to lie, or to, whatever you want to call them, right? Because we are only being dishonest and lying because we're trying to obtain something, right? And when we have nothing to obtain, there's no reason to do any of those things, right? So that state of mind tends to fall asleep. I remember talking to one of the teachers when I first began to eat once a day and to sleep on the floor, and I was trying to figure out what was going on with this process. And I said to the one gentleman, I said, because we were done eating for the day, and we would all sit around, and then we would say, now we are done with consumption for the day. Now we put away consumption, right? And we will not take anything from this planet other than water or some medicine if we need something for health, not to harm ourselves, but to give the planet a rest, right? So we let everything else go, right? So I remember saying to the monks at the time, I said, so that means that we have nothing else to do, right? We're done our day. And the monk laughed. He says, that is because you only think of your stomach, right? Of yourself, right? And the fact was I had only thought about my stomach and myself. And now that I was done with that opportunity, it seemed like I had all this spare time, right? So I said to the teacher, I said, so what do you do with your time, right? And he says, I'm a gardener. I said, oh, that's nice. And thinking he was a gardener, right? So I said, oh, what do you garden? He says, oh, I grow good karma, he said. And that's when he explained to me how his life worked, right? He said that he ate only once a day, and he did so in the morning. And then he took in nothing else, right? And he said for that reason, he set aside his needy state early in the day, and he began to walk through his own life as if he was walking through a garden, needing absolutely nothing at all, right? The state of contentment that we were talking about, in meditation, and the state of contentment that we're talking about when we are eating once a day, right? But he was sitting in the state of contentment permanently now, right? So he would say, in the state of permanent contentment, he would walk through his own life as if he was walking through a park. And he would begin to water all of the relationships in his life, his family, his friends, the other monks, right? The community, right? The plants, the life, even his finances he would water. Everything he treated like a plant, planted in his garden of his life, right? And he would spend his days watering each plant or each relationship, right? So that they would grow stronger and stronger. And for that reason, his future was really powerful, right? Because every day when he finished his work of loving his life, basically, he would go to bed and he would wake up in the morning and his life would be better than the day before, right? And then he would eat his one meal a day, and then he would begin, as a gardener, caring for his relationships, right? And that is because he began to realize that where energy met energy, there was great power when that energy began to cooperate. And he began to build cooperative relationships all over. So that is the benefit of eating once a day and then finding contentment early each day, right? Some of us have never ever thought of ending contentment, and have probably never ended the feeling of wanting or obtaining or consuming that's been going on for decades, right? What does it feel like to not consume, right? To be at the being done consumption for the whole day. At first it feels kind of scary, but in the end it is a wonderful feeling that leads to walking through our own life as if we're walking through a park. Now, I have done something similar to these teachers, and I have produced a document. There it is. So this is a document that I produced to help myself each day. And what I do is I put the date up here in this corner. I don't know where right here. This corner here. And then these are how I spread good karma each day. Once I've done my meal in the morning, I make a list of how do I want to build a better relationship with myself, with my home, with my family, with my friends, with new acquaintances, with the environment, the air, the land, the water, my inner child, animals, right? Plant life, sustainability, or my work situation, right? We don't live in our work situation from a needy state, but from a contented state. We simply water our work like a garden and grow it into a better place, right? Entertainment and rest, right? Our highest self. And also I try to build relationships with our higher energy partners, things like angels or crystals and guides. And finally, I build a good relationship with my true path. Excuse me. And so the instruction says that daily create loving kindness acts for each of these areas to engage and improve our relationships, right? These acts improve the health of others, which in turn becomes a healthy environment for us to live in. Our path is to care for all we come into contact with in the present moment, right? Plant good karma. So what I do is I will take this list and then I'll put morning, afternoon, or evening on each one of them, and then I'll create a small little schedule for myself, right? The ones that I want to do all day long I write up here, and I use that as a mantra, right? That today I will be open, or today I will remember the names of others, or today I will ask questions of new acquaintances, or whatever it will be, right? And I make that my daily, intention mantra, right? And then I have a loose schedule in the morning of how I'm going to plant karma, in the afternoon and in the evening, right? And at the end of the day, I can look at this list and see how I have used my intentions wisely, right? To plant good karma in my life, right? And my life becomes stronger because of this list each day. And one of the interesting things it also does is this list itself acts like a sitting in contentment state, right? That this is, if we could do all the things we wanted to do today to be content, this would be the list, right? And then we can see how sometimes our own intentions work against us. That this didn't get done or that didn't get done, or we decide to watch TV all day long, right? And not that we're picking on ourselves, but we can begin to see how much of our energy is being used intentionally and how much of our energy is actually under the control of habits that is actually holding us back from following our true paths, right? The true things that we would have done that day if we hadn't been worn down or weakened by bad habits, right? So that's the lesson on on the power of finding contentment early. Sorry about that. This is part 2, and I hope you got something out of this, and I will include this little daily planting loving karma plan so you can download it and use it for yourself if you want. So we'll see you in the next lesson, guys. Thanks a lot.